Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. In today's lesson, we are going to begin reading our play by Shakespeare, which is called A Midsummer Night's Dream. So, can you please copy down the title, which is Aegeus's Complaint, the date, and the learning objective? Pause the video and copy those down now, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you're ready to complete the do now. And for today's do now, I would like you to copy the 3 correct sentences. So, out of these 5 statements, only 3 of them are correct. You need to write those 3 down, please. Pause the video and do the task now. Okay, if you're back, that means you are ready to make some purple pen corrections. Remember, give it a tick if you got it right. If you got it wrong, that's okay. Just cross it and write the correct answer. So, these were the 3 correct statements. The least powerful people in Athens were slaves. Shakespeare went to a grammar school, and women were taught how to be good housewives. And these are all things that we learnt about last week in our lessons where I introduced you to Shakespeare. Pause the video and copy these down now and make any corrections that you need to. Okay, if you're back, that means we are ready to begin talking about our play. Before we do that, it's really important that we understand the difference between a play script, which is what we are going to be reading with A Midsummer Night's Dream, compared to a novel, which is what Oliver Twist is. You might know the difference, but I'm just going to make it really, really clear what the difference is. So when we begin reading our script, you don't get confused. So let's have a look. So novels are meant to be read, whereas scripts are meant to be acted. They are meant to be read and performed on a stage in front of an audience. Scripts are divided into acts and scenes. And scripts also include stage directions. We're going to look at these as we go through. The stage directions are going to be showing what is happening on the stage. When you go to a play, you always see that there's loads of costumes, and there's props, and there's lights, and there's special effects. Those stage directions show and describe all of those things. Novels, instead, are able to actually describe the characters' events, and they use adjectives and verbs and adverbs to describe things that are happening, but that doesn't happen in scripts. And as we know, novels are divided into chapters. So, in Oliver Twist, when we were reading it and I was teaching you about it, we did kind of a lesson on each chapter. But for A Midsummer Night's Dream, we're going to be doing a lesson on different acts and scenes. There's no need for you to write anything down, but it's just important before we start reading that you understand that the script is different to a novel. Also, before we start reading, I want to introduce you to some of the key characters. So before we read different sections of the play, different acts and scenes, I'm going to introduce you to the characters that are in this scene. As the part that we are reading today is from the beginning of the play, there's a lot of characters that we are being introduced to. We have Aegeus, and Aegeus is Hermia's father. This is Hermia, and Hermia is in love with Lysander, and Lysander also loves Hermia. So these two want to be a couple. We also have Theseus, and he's the Duke of Athens, which means he is really powerful. Maybe you can tell that from all of his medals. And Theseus is about to marry this lovely lady here, Hippolyta. She is an Amazonian queen. So soon enough, these two are going to be husband and wife. We also have Demetrius and Helena. Demetrius is the suitor of Hermia, which means he is the man that Hermia's father wants her to marry. But that's a shame for Helena, this lady here, because she loves Demetrius. At this point, you're probably like, Madam, everybody loves everyone. What is happening? We're going to watch that unfold. So, today's lesson, as you can see from the title, is reading about Aegeus's complaint. That is the first half of Act 1, Scene 1. And in a lesson later this week, we are going to read the second half of Act 1, Scene 1. Before we read the play and Aegeus's complaint, I'm just going to summarise to you what is happening. So, at his palace, Theseus, who we know is the Duke of Athens, and his future wife Hippolyta are discussing their wedding and their wedding plans. When Aegeus, who is a citizen of Athens, which just means a man who lives in Athens, enters the room, and he's followed by his daughter Hermia, as well as Lysander and Demetrius. Although Aegeus has promised Hermia in marriage to Demetrius, who loves her, Lysander has actually won Hermia's heart, and Hermia refuses to obey her father and to marry Demetrius because she wants to marry Lysander instead. Aegeus is furious, and he says to Theseus that the law, the Athenian law that Theseus controls, needs to punish Hermia for failing to comply with his demands by refusing to marry Demetrius and instead wanting to marry Lysander. At this point, Lysander interrupts, and he accuses Demetrius of being unstable in love. He's unstable in love because he was once engaged to Hermia's friend Helena, but he abandoned Helena after he met Hermia. Clearly, Lysander is trying to show everybody that Demetrius isn't a suitable husband for Hermia and that he is much better. Before they leave, Theseus orders Hermia to take the time remaining before his marriage to Hippolyta to make up her mind. Otherwise, there will be severe consequences. At this point, Theseus, Hippolyta, Aegeus, and Demetrius depart, leaving Hermia alone with Lysander. Hermia is alone with Lysander on stage, and that's what we're going to look at in the lesson later this week. But today we are focusing on Aegeus's complaint. Before we get into reading Aegeus's complaint and the play in general, it's really important that we understand that Shakespeare's language is very difficult. So the way that Shakespeare writes his scripts and his plays are different to the way that people write books and plays today. The language is different. That's okay, because we're going to look at the original script written by Shakespeare with some challenging language, and we're also going to look at a translated version which is written in modern English, and that will help us to understand a little bit better. So, the black sections will be the original script written by Shakespeare, and the red versions will be the translated. So, how we're going to do it is I'm going to read a sentence or two at a time from the original, and then we'll look at the translated version to make sure we understand what's happening. So, we're going to read Aegeus's complaint, and I've just cropped it into a few small sections to make sure that we understand it as we go through. So, full of vexation come I with complaint, says Aegeus, against my child, my daughter Hermia. Let's have a look at the modern translation. Aegeus is saying, I'm here full of anger, full of vexation to complain about my daughter Hermia. Let's go back to the original. He says, stand forth, Demetrius, my noble lord. This man hath my consent to marry her. And in modern language, Aegeus is saying, step forward, Demetrius, stand forth. My lord, this man, Demetrius, has my permission to marry her. permission and consent mean the same thing. Aegeus continues and says, "Stand forth, Lysander, and my gracious Duke. This man hath bewitched the bosom of my child." In modern English, Aegeus would say, "Step forward, Lysander." And he says to Theseus, "But this other man here, Lysander, he has cast a magic spell over my child's heart." So, bosom of my child means child's heart, and bewitched means that there's been some kind of magic spell. So here, Aegeus is angry because he said that Demetrius can marry Hermia, but Lysander, he thinks, has performed magic to make Hermia not love Demetrius anymore. Okay, let's carry on reading Aegeus's complaint. Thou, Lysander, thou hast given her rhymes and interchanged love tokens with my child." Aegeus is saying, you, which is what thou means. Lysander, you've given her poems, rhymes, and exchanged tokens of love with my daughter. So exchanged and interchanged mean the same thing. He continues to say, "Thou hast by moonlight at her window sung, with feigning voice, verses of feigning love." In modern English, Aegeus would say, "You've pretended to be in love with her, singing fake love songs softly at her window by moonlight." So feigning kind of means to be fake. He continues to say, "And stolen the oppression of her fantasy, with bracelets of thy hair, rings, gauds, conceits, knacks, trifles, nosegays, and sweetmeats. In modern English, he says, "You've captured her imagination by giving her locks of your hair, rings, toys, trinkets, knickknacks, little presents, flowers, and candies, sweets." So where he says stolen the impression of her fancy, he means you've captured the imagination. Aegeus believes that Lysander has basically bribed his daughter by giving her loads of nice things. He continues to say, "Messengers of strong prevailment in hardened youth." He says these are things that can really influence a young person. He continues to say, "With cunning hast thou filched my daughter's heart, turned her obedience, which is due to me, to stubborn harshness." In modern English, he said, "You've been sly in order to steal my daughter's heart, making her stubborn and harsh instead of obedient like she should be." Obedient means that she should follow what her dad says. So, let's carry on. This is the final part of Aegeus' speech. He's now addressing Theseus, the Duke. He says, "And my gracious Duke, be it so she will not here before your grace consent to marry with Demetrius. I beg the ancient privilege of Athens." In modern English, Aegeus would say, "And my gracious Duke, if she won't agree to marry Demetrius right now," remember, to agree is to consent, "I ask you to let me exercise the right that all fathers have in Athens." The ancient privilege of Athenian fathers means that the father has control over their daughter. And he says, if Hermia will not agree to marry Demetrius, I need to make sure that I am still in control. And he says, "As she is mine, I may dispose of her, which shall be either to this gentleman or to her death, according to our law immediately provided in that case." In modern English, he says, "Since she belongs to me, I can do what I want with her, as the law says. I can either make her marry Demetrius or have her killed," which is crazy. Just because she's refusing to marry the man that her dad wants her to marry, her dad can get her killed because she belongs to him, which shows the power that the men had over the women in Athens. Okay, so we've heard about Aegeus' complaint, we've heard why he's angry, and we've heard what he wants to do about the situation. So, what I would like you to do now is copy these facts about Aegeus. Number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and number 5. Pause the video and copy those down now, please. Okay, if you're back, that means you have these 5 things written down. Now, what I would like you to do is to copy these quotations next to the correct fact. So, we have quote A, I may dispose of her which shall be either to this gentleman or to her death. B, full of vexation. Remember, vexation means anger. C, with cunning hast thou filched my daughter's heart. This shows that Aegeus believes that Lysander has been sly and stolen his daughter's heart. D, Demetrius, my noble lord, this man hath my consent to marry her. Remember, consent can mean like permission or agreement. And E, this man hath bewitched the bosom of my child. Remember, this means heart, and bewitched means magic spell. It means that he thinks that Lysander has cast a magic spell to win Hermia's heart. So what you need to do now, you need to look at your facts that you've written down, and you need to decide which quote on the screen matches up with which fact. You need to copy that down next to the correct fact, and then come back to the video so we can make corrections. Pause and complete this task now, please. Okay. So, now you can use your purple pen to tick or cross your answers. Make sure you write the correct answers if you got it wrong. That's okay. Just make sure you get it down. So Aegeus is furious with his daughter. The quote is full of vexation. Remember, vexation means anger. So he's full of anger. Number 2, Aegeus knows who his daughter should marry. The matching quote is Demetrius, my noble lord, this man hath my consent to marry her. Number 3, Aegeus thinks Lysander has used magic to win over his daughter. And of course, it's quote E, which is this man hath bewitched the bosom of my child. Number 4, we have Aegeus thinks Lysander is cruel. And he thinks that Lysander is cruel because he thinks that with cunning hast thou filched my daughter's heart. He thinks Lysander is cruel because he thinks he's slyly stolen Hermia's heart. And finally, Aegeus thinks his daughter should be killed for disobeying him. He says that I can do what I want with her. I may dispose of her, which shall be either to this gentleman or to her death. Either she will marry Demetrius or she will die. Pause the video and make any corrections that you need to now, please. Okay, if you're back, that means that you have this written down correctly in your book or on your piece of paper. Please now make sure that you send a picture of your lovely work from today. It's really important that you do, so I can check that you're understanding each lesson and I can give you help if you're struggling. Make sure you submit your work to my email. I look forward to looking at your excellent work and I will speak to you in the next video. Well done.